Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition, episode number 4. Can't believe it. It's going by so quickly. Of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. I'm Jim, and joining me, as always, my former hitting instructor, coach, friend and co-host, professional hitting instructor, Jake Epstein. Jake, how we doing?
We're doing well, Jimmy. We're surviving and getting a lot of good feedback from the podcast from a lot of people around the country. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad, and they do like the co-host idea. They like my new title as co-host. But they say we have a nice rapport, Jim. So I like that. That's good. You're a good guy.
10 years ago, we had a really good rapport too. When those, so they don't like broadcast coach, is what you're saying.
I guess not.
Yeah.
No.
Like good feedback. I want to pepper a question at you before we get to our topic today. I saw this on Twitter. You know, it's funny, for a guy who hates Twitter, I sure spend a lot of time on Twitter. But I found a good baseball mind on Twitter last week. And it said, if you could use one statistic to pick a team of hitters, what would it be? Batting average, slugging, on-base percentage, OPS, RBI production. I'm going to add one more in there because I like this statistic. Weighted on-base average.
You can only pick one?
Only pick one.
OPS.
OPS. And why is that?
It's the only one I can spell.
Okay. Batting. Yeah.
No, OPS to me tells me guys are getting on base and they're also slugging at the same time. So anytime you have a higher slugging percentage, you're scoring runners from first base. So those runners on first base, you know, whether it's a walk or an error or a hit by pitch or a single, because they are getting on base with batting average, they're slugging them in. So I don't mean slugging, you know, a guy that hits, 40 home runs, but a guy that has, a slugging percentage, over 550 or 600. That guy is going to score a ton of runs, and he's also going to be in scoring position a lot.
What about weighted on base average? There's a lot of talk about how weighted runs created and isolated power and weighted on base average. 3 statistics sabermetrically that I really, really like, and I like the idea with weighted on base average, how it measures and weighs certain outcomes. Is that kind of close to the top 3 list if you had to pick?
Absolutely. In fact, those two could be interchangeable because it does carry in the slugging aspect of it. Yeah. Which, again, anytime, and coming from the SEC, it was so apparent that you're not going to get 3 hits an inning. It's just not going to happen. You might get a walk, you might get another hit. If you can make that other hit for extra bases, you're going to score runs. And getting 3 and 4 hits an inning, singles, just isn't going to happen against good competition. And you see that in the major leagues because the bullpens are so good, and all of a sudden the guy's cruising along in the 5th inning, he gives up a walk, he gives up a hit. It's 1st and 3rd where he would normally, try to get out of that. Boom, he's gone, and they're going to bring in specialists from there on out.
We're probably going to get into those statistics in our data installation series, which is coming up here in a few weeks. Before we get down the rabbit hole, though, I do want to ask one more question, and it pertains to batting average. How much does batting average to you nowadays really matter? I'm still one that thinks batting average measures a hitter pretty well, and I can go into that, but it will take me 20 minutes. What's your thoughts now on batting average with the 3 statistics that I just mentioned previously and how that weighs in today's game?
It's definitely minimized, but I take personally, I think it matters in a sense that it's telling me a guy has good bat barrel skills, which means he's not going to strike out as much. And I don't mind strikeouts, but I mind giving away strikeouts when, getting a base hit is still okay. Meaning there's a runner on third and less than 2 outs and you strike out. That's like the worst thing that can possibly happen. Or a runner on second with nobody out and you strike out and that guy's stranded there. So, I don't think it's as high. It's definitely not as high up as it used to be. I could tell you a story about Tony Gwynn, and I'll make it as nice as I can, and I won't mention who the people were, but There was Tony Gwynn, and it was at spring training, and the coaching staff was sitting kind of together, and Tony Gwynn was there as well, and he was reading the newspaper, and it said something about Juan Gonzalez. Juan Gonzalez is signed a new contract for, I don't know what it was, $8 million a year, $7 million a year, whatever it was. And Tony was very upset about it. He's like, this guy is, whatever. I'm going to be a Hall of Famer. I hit 335 last year, and I make $3 million a year. What a joke this is. And he threw the paper down, got up, and left. And one of the coaches said, yeah, but he drives in 120 runs a year. And, that holds true even today. RBIs and runs scored is a pretty good combination. So, yes, batting average is important because you got to get on base somehow. You're not gonna hit a double every single time. And if you can limit strikeouts, that usually means your batting average is a little higher. But it's certainly not a metric that is used now for contracts. It might be a metric at the lower levels, definitely in scouting and player development. But once you get to the big leagues, it's more about scoring runs. And if a guy hits 210 but scores a lot of runs versus a guy that hits 300 and doesn't score very many runs, meaning if I hit 300 and I was the slowest guy in the game of baseball, which I was, well, I'm going to clog up bases and I'm not going to score many runs. So I better have a much higher slugging percentage so I can get to second base or score guys from first base. If you're a little guy and you have, a higher batting average, well, that guy's going to score a lot more runs. So again, it has to do with player type.
Well, you mentioned a lot there about scoring runs, and who would have thought the game of baseball revolves around scoring runs? It's the main thing.
That's it.
How can we score runs and win the game? All right. Anyway, let's get into today's topic, and we're talking about bat speed and bat quickness. And I'm very excited to talk about this because there is a difference, but there's also similarities as well. So let's just do broad range stroke here. Looking at the similarities and differences from your vantage point, what do you see?
So bat speed is how fast that barrel is moving at point of contact. That varies by different points of contact. So if we let the ball get deeper in the zone, our bat speed's not going to be as fast. Therefore, we don't hit the ball as hard or as far to the opposite field as we would to the pull side when our bat head reaches its maximum velocity. So as an instructor, I'm trying to maximize a player's bat speed with their contact points. So if a player, and this isn't necessarily something you have to do mechanically. So somebody like, we talked about Judge, who hits the ball much deeper in the zone because he has a barrel drop. He's strong, so his bat speed is plenty quick, really, really deep in the zone to hit balls out of the park, where somebody like Yelich is plenty strong too. But, his bat speed, because of his attack angle and the way he comes into the ball, his happy zone is more out in front of his front foot. That's where he's going to hit most of his balls. That's where his bat speed and swing plane are maximized. So the key is to maximize where the barrel speed is the greatest for the most part. I mean, we're not always going to be there with, what if our barrel's in the zone and it's not going to pull a ball foul. So it has to do with mechanics. Somebody that hits the ball out in front, if they release the barrel early from their body and they hit the ball way out in front, well, they might pull balls foul. Somebody that stays inside the ball longer has to wait longer to kind of release that bat lag and that barrel speed. They have to hit the ball out in front. So you'll also have, because of bat speed, you'll have different bat quicknesses. So the cool part is Blast measures both of those, the Blast sensor, probably the other sensors out there too. It measures, how long does it take for the hands to move, once the hands move, to when you make contact. So that's bat quickness. That's your efficiency. Do you have something in your swing that causes that to take too long? So, I mean, this was years ago. My dad told me, before Blast motion sensors and yada, 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 that major leaguers, typically it was 0.15 to 0.16 seconds
for quickness,
for bat quickness. And that's from your launch position, right? That's from heel plant, but hands are still back. And then as soon as the hands go, that's how long it takes. And we used to chart that on our original, the JC video software we used, Jim, when we were training you. We could measure that, put the stopwatch on it. And, now Blast does the same thing. Now, it's not an end all, because if you let the ball get deeper in the zone, essentially it's measuring when you make contact. Your bat quickness is good, right? geez, I was really late on that pitch and fouled it off, but my bat quickness number said 0.14 seconds. Yeah, but I didn't hit it good, and my bat speed wasn't good. So what I'm trying to do is have bat quickness so that they're efficient to the ball, meaning their mechanics. There's no casting or bat drag. Their mechanics are solid. And then obviously I want to maximize bat speed as well so that when they do make contact with the ball, they're getting their best result.
So when you were talking there, I wrote down Tim Tebow because I have a story about him, and this pertains to a question I have about bat quickness. So a couple of years ago when he was at the advanced state level with St. Lucie in the Mets organization, I watched him play, and I remember I was high above the ballpark. And for those who've ever been to St. Lucie or have been to First Data ballpark field, whichever it is, the press box is very high. And a lot of times scouts will sit up there because they've told me to get a good look at hitters and certain pitchers for whatever reason. And I remember watching Tebow in his second plate appearance. And Jake, I said, he fouled one off to the left side. And I said to myself, he's late. He doesn't have bat quickness. So when you're late on a ball, like Tebow was there, is it a product of being or having a lack of bat quickness, or is it just letting the ball travel? And can you tell a guy's bat quickness if it can improve or if it's up to par with where he needs to get to based off where he fouls off the ball and how he fouls it off to the opposite way?
That's a great question. There's a lot of players that are just late. You know, I mean, they foul balls off because they're a little bit late. They foul balls off because they have a barrel drop. A player I worked with somewhat recently had a bat vertical angle that was so steep that he fouled everything off to the opposite field. He was a left-handed hitter, and he would foul it over like the third base dugout. And when you looked at him, he was a freak, right? I mean, his bat quickness was insane. His bat speed was off the charts. He actually wasn't that late, but because he dropped his barrel so much, that's where the ball went. So there's so many different variables that go in. That's why video is so crucially important. I mean, data is important too. You know, you can look at blast, but if I just look at blast, I don't know where that player made contact. Were they early? Were they late? So I don't know if that bat, because bat speed's probably going to be different if they hit a ball well. So say you're a left-handed hitter, you hit a line drive to left field. Okay, so you hit a ball well to the opposite field, and your bat speed could be, say, like 70 miles an hour. But when you hit it out in front, you hit a line drive to right field, maybe it's 76 miles an hour, right? I mean, we're talking like you could totally have a 6 mile an hour difference between inside outside. Okay. In addition to that, you could also have, 2 to 3 100ths of a second difference between bat quickness. Okay. And additionally, on top of that, you could have like a 10-degree difference in attack angle. So these are all metrics on the blast motion sensor. If somebody just sends me, hey, I had this bat speed, I had this attack angle, and I had this bat quickness or this time to contact, where was the pitch? And did you hit it well? Like, that's crucially important. So people are starting to look at metrics, and there's so much that goes into that, but you have to have the video to go with it, because video will tell me, oh, he has a cast move. So you ask, is this something that could get better? So, I'm thinking of, I remember doing some videos for 2 major league organizations about Tebow. Hey, what do you think of this? Should we sign him? So this was 5 years ago or whatever he signed. And his mechanics weren't too bad. Like, he didn't have any catastrophic issues with his swing. His lead arm straightened out a little bit, but didn't have any bad drag and stuff like that. So I would assume his bat quickness would be just fine. It would be like major league average. Okay. I would, maybe the way he reacted to the pitch, and maybe he sees the pitch, and maybe when his rhythm gets going, rhythm and timing, well, there's a segment for us. I know it's on the list somewhere, but that could be why he was late on those pitches. And it could have nothing to do with bat speed or bat quickness.
So I looked at his video too. I think he was working with Gary Sheffield at the time in the batting cage. But did you feel that was and I don't want to get down the Tebow rabbit hole here, but did you feel that it was more of a product of his stiff lower half? Because I felt like he was upper body centric in his swing.
Well, he is, because his upper body is massive, right? I mean, he feels like those are probably his stronger muscles, right? He looks in the mirror and he's like, I got a big upper body. I'm going to use that. So, and that's somebody that, when he didn't play a whole lot, right? For like 8 years or 10 years. I don't know how long, but when you look at little guys, you look at these 12-year-old Dominican kids or 12-year-old American kids or whoever, they got to use their legs. If they don't use it, they have no power. They have no upper body strength, so they have to use their legs. So that's always the first thing that gets built in. You have a big, strong guy that didn't really grow up playing a ton of baseball. I mean, he played in high school and whatnot, but, he didn't have all those reps. His legs probably aren't as free and easy as somebody that's played a little bit longer. But I didn't see, I know what you're talking about. I don't think his legs are awful, but they definitely aren't smooth and kind of and relaxed when he goes to swing. It's a very forced movement.
Yeah, well said. Now, let's switch gears here. Talking about bat speed, 10 years ago, you mentioned to me that Albert Pujols' bat speed, this is when he was still with the Cardinals, was about 77 to 79 miles per hour. And when I see people say, well, this guy's bat speed is 90, this guy's bat speed is 95, I kind of scratch my head a little bit. First off, I say, well, bat quickness is just as important, and you're not mentioning that. But I also talk about how we don't disseminate bat speed the way it should be. We just put a number on it and say, well, that's great. Let's expand on that a little bit. What would you say the average Major League bat speed is for, say, 3 different level type of hitters? So, for example, 3-tiered, I should say. So, Giancarlo Stanton or Aaron Judge, power guy, as compared to, I don't know, throw out there a gap guy, maybe a hitter, Miggy Cabrera in his day, and then say like a Billy Hamilton.
Yeah, there's a huge range. And somebody just posted this, and I don't have it available in front of me, but it's not what you think it is. It's not nearly as high as what you think it is. I think Blast still says Major League average is like 78 to 82 when you average everybody in. So, your smaller guys, your singles, contact kind of guys are going to be more in that low 70s range. Pujols he was in that 78 to 80 range where most guys are. And then you also have, I think the highest one that I've seen recorded was Bryce Harper, which makes sense, right? I mean, that dude gets everything going and he releases that barrel out in front and he just smokes balls, and he was in the 90s. So I don't think, it's not an end all. Is what I'm saying, because I could swing, you have guys that, they could swing a 28-ounce bat really fast, but it doesn't go as far. There was actually a study that was recently released that had somebody that was swinging a 32 drop 5 and went to a 33 drop 3 and hit the ball harder. So I'm a big fan of what is the ball doing? Because I like to trust technology, but I don't think technology is, I don't think $150 technology is probably like going to go on the space shuttle one day. So there's going to be goofs in there left and right. Like I'll have players and then I see it, I'm like, that vertical bat angle doesn't match up. So I don't think these things are 100%, totally accurate. There's algorithms that are involved. How long is the bat? They take the sweet spot. So it's not necessarily the end of the bat. Some people measure bat speed at the end of the bat. Well, it's going to be much faster at the end of the bat, like a golf club, versus where the sweet spot is. So I know Blast does it where the sweet spot is. Okay. So they have to, kind of use the length of the bat and the shape of the bat and all that kind of stuff to create these algorithms. So what doesn't lie is what the ball's doing. How fast is that ball moving after? I remember I was in New York City. One of my good friends now, certified instructor, runs a facility there called the Baseball Center, Upper West Side of Manhattan. Coolest spot, like, to have a baseball academy. It's in the basement of the Apple Bank, right off Broadway in 70. I always get this wrong. 74th, maybe. Anyway, so we were talking about different things, and I had this high school player in. From the city, and he was using a wood bat, a 32-inch metal bat, drop 3, and he had this wood bat that was a 33-inch. It was wood. It was an ounce heavier and an inch longer. And I was like, okay, let's see. I want you to swing this bat. And sure enough, the ball came off that wood bat with better density because it was a good wood bat, harder than what the other one was. But he swung the lighter bat faster. Okay, so there is a density, there is a math part of the equation. Now, all things considered, if you don't have very good bat speed, you're not going to hit the ball very far. But once you do have good mechanics and you've maximized your bat speed, that bat plays a very important, that leverage or the mass of that bat plays a very important part of that equation as well. So I like to measure the ball off the bat. And obviously you have to use averages. What is the ball off the bat doing with this bat and your bat speed here versus this bat and this size bat, excuse me.
Yeah, and for context, when you say 33-30, we mean 33 inches, 30 ounces.
And, that's correct.
And sometimes guys will go 30. I remember you told me a while back about how there are some major leaguers who still swing bats today. Maybe not, this was 10 years ago, maybe not today, but they still swing bats that are 30, sometimes 33, 32.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, Teddy Williams, they all bats that were very, very heavy, and I think that's why they also had that hitch in their swing as well, but they generated some real force and really good bats.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling me stories, and my dad was a big, big dude. He was a football player in college, right? So he was a big baseball player in the 60s and 70s. And when they were in Washington and Frank Howard was his teammate. So Frank Howard, former, I think Mets coach for a long time too. But Frank was massive. Like Frank's 6'9", like 290 pounds, like a big human. Not a weightlifting human, but just a large human being. So they used to hit balls in the old RFK Stadium in the upper deck, and they would paint the seats. And I think one year my dad hit 5 and Hondo hit 8 or something in the upper deck. And when they went and measured them, they were like over 500 feet. And you don't see that anymore. And it's not like they were stronger than anybody around today. But what size bet? My dad used a 35-inch, 34-ounce and sometimes 35-ounce. I can't even get my hand around the handle. It was so thick. And Hondo used a bigger bat than that. So when you get something that big with that much momentum coming into a ball, you hit balls further. And that's why balls were hit so far back then, is not because of the ball, it's because of the bat. Today you can't do that because guys, when the 8th inning rolled around in 1968, like the starter was still pitching. And if it wasn't Bob Gibson, you know what I mean? He went from throwing 94, now he's throwing 88. And his ball's not sinking as much, and he's, you can get around on it. But nowadays, I think that bat quickness and the guys have grown up with metal bats. They've grown up with drop threes, and you can't get one bigger than a 34-inch bat growing up. That they're just not used to anything bigger than that, and they shy away from it until they really get to the upper levels of pro ball or the big leagues, and somebody says, "Hey, you know what? You should try this," and then maybe they do try it and have success. Softball's the same way. I remember Bailey Hemphill at Alabama, she uses a 34-inch, and typically, a lot of collegiate players use, and even high school, drop 12s. So they can go up to drop 12, maybe not in college, but drop 10, drop 11, and I think Bailey's is like a drop 7 or 8. It's massive, but the sweet spot on it and the density of that bat means if she gets jammed by maybe an inch or hits one off the end an inch, she's still going to be able to generate that power. Now, not everybody has the strength to do that, but if you can, give it a try. Why not?
Yeah, and nowadays, too, in baseball, it's flipped. The starter's throwing 93 to 95, and the reliever's coming in. Whoever else. Cody Allen back about 4 years ago with the Indians throwing 97 to 99. Brian Shaw, everything's moving. So it's the game's a little bit different. By the way, I'm glad you mentioned Bailey because I wanted to ask you about softball and how the bat quickness and bat speed in softball correlates. By the way, if you ever question, you shouldn't do this, but if you ever question Jake's credentials, just look at Bailey. I don't want to say her last name. I don't want to say it wrong. She plays softball in the SEC. She's as good as they come, correct?
She's awesome. She could hit. We started training when she was, her dad attended my certification program years ago, maybe 10 years ago. What Bailey's? No, it had to be more than that. Anyway, he got certified, then they came out, or vice versa, when she was, I don't know how old, 10 or 11 years old. And you could tell she could hit. Like she was special. And then every year they would make that trip out there, and we would tweak things and adjust things, and slowly but surely she turned into she turned into an All-American right at Alabama. So when you talk about softball, good God, is that hard? My goodness, I mean, you get girls throwing 70 miles an hour from 43 feet, and it's moving. Holy smokes! Like, you have to have a plan. You have to have the right approach of what you want to do each at bat based on how they're pitching you. And then you got to try to be on time with something that's 70 miles an hour versus something that's 50 miles an hour from that short distance, because they're changeups and screwballs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So softball players have to have very, very good, efficient swings to be successful at that level.
Yeah, and we're going to have an episode talking about softball mechanics in high-level swings, which, I mean, Bailey plays at a very high level, playing in the SEC. The SEC is good in any sport, though. I mean,
it's pretty good.
It's really break down. But when it comes to softball, with bat quickness and bat speed, how similar is it to your approach and your teachings of bat quickness and bat speed when it comes to baseball players?
First, it's the same. I mean, if somebody's throwing 70 miles an hour from 43 feet, they're releasing it at 40 feet. It's like 100-mile-an-hour fastball, which baseball players are seeing. So the timing, the wind up with the pitch, and we talk about this with all of our softball players, is when do we get going? Based on her windmill. The only nice part about softball compared to baseball is they can't alter their windmill very much. Where a baseball player can slide step. A baseball player, because there's always a windup in softball. They can slide step. They can have a slow delivery with the timing. In softball, players will have different speeds, but pretty much once they start going and get to the top of their windmill, there's not a whole lot left. So they have to start at a very similar time to baseball players. They have to have their foot in a certain spot when the ball is released, just like a base, and that's about the same as a baseball player. And then they have to have their foot down. The difference is they have a shortened amount of time to make that decision.
Right.
Ball or strike, where it's going to be. And that's the difficult part.
We alluded to it a little bit earlier in the episode, but how a heavier bat equates to quicker bat speed. Maybe you mentioned this and I just glossed over it, but how much does that heavier bat, if you can generate that force, it's physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much better bat quickness will you have if you can generate that force with that heavier bat, or will it just kind of stay the same?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be quicker with the heavier bat. You could if you became more efficient. So a lot of times you put something heavier in your hand, and your body has to become more efficient to swing that heavier bat. Okay, if not, then it's drastically moving the opposite direction, and it gets way slower. Okay, so imagine you were cutting down a tree and you had this really light axe. You could kind of swing that thing all over the place. Then all of a sudden we gave you like a 10-pound axe. You'd really have to get your body involved to swing it. Otherwise you'd hurt yourself and, cut off a limb. So I think the barrel release of a heavier barrel. So that's why you have, barrel weight or end-loaded bats. If you think of, a wood bat model like a 243 or a 161 or something that, had a huge barrel on the end. Well, if you have a swing that never releases the barrel, if you swing a large barreled bat, a thinner handle and a large barrel to create whip and speed at the end, but you don't hit the ball when that barrel releases, meaning out in front, then you're totally wasting that extra weight and leverage. So guys that hit the ball, that are more opposite field hitters that let the ball get deep, they should use something that's lighter and more balanced. Where a guy that hits the ball out in front, thinking of like a Sheffield who used to throw that sucker out in front, right? He can use something with a gigantic whippy kind of barrel because that fits his swing. Now, at a young age, you don't really have that option. Here's your 2 5/8 barrel, Easton, Marucci, Louisville, whatever you got. But as you get older and they do have end loaded and more balanced bats, that should match your swing depending on the kind of hitter you have and where your contact points are.
What is a bat vertical angle? 2-part question for you here. And how does it correlate to bat quickness and bat speed? Because that's a term that you mentioned earlier on in the episode.
Boy, there's your $1 million question for today because of what's being taught, right? What's being taught So Ted Williams said what? Hey, you know what you should do? You should be on plane with the pitch.
Right.
That's genius. Okay, the ball's dropping 10 degrees. You need to swing up at 10 degrees. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Like, I don't think anybody's arguing with that anymore. Nobody's saying swing, negative, to that. Right. But when do we get on plane? Okay, that's part of what I spend a lot of time on. And then how long do we stay on plane from there? So somebody like, let's take Judge as an example, right? Who's a big dude, hits a lot of home runs to right field, right center field. That's kind of his power. Even a guy like Chris Davis, not the Oakland A's Chris Davis, but the poor Chris Davis, that he's such a great human being. Like, I just want this guy to succeed and have fun playing baseball again. I really do, because he's so good with the community, like wherever. Anyway, so you have left-handed Baltimore Chris Davis, who hits the majority of his home runs go to left field as well, left center field. Well, why is that? Well, they get on that plane really deep in the zone. Well, how do you get on plane deeper in the zone? Well, the only way to do that is to dump your barrel and to drop your barrel. So how does that correlate to vertical bat angle? Well, that's exactly what vertical bat angle is. The lower or the higher the negative number. Okay. So negative 30 to 40, negative 30 to negative 40, that would be a lower vertical bat angle. It means the barrel's lower than the knob. Okay. By, 30 or 40 degrees. Those guys have to hit the ball deeper in the zone, because when they come out of that vertical bat angle dump or drop, then they get really steep coming forward, and they're not on plane out in front. They'll smother balls, they'll swing over breaking balls, they'll top balls to the pull side, they'll top spin everything. So if you have a big vertical bat angle or a low vertical bat, see, now I confuse myself. If your vertical bat angle is, if your barrel is
correct,
what's that?
If it's a high negative, is that what you're trying to get?
Yes, a high negative. Yeah. Okay. So would that be a lower? I mean, if it's negative 40 degrees out, that's a lower temperature. So we're going to say lower. So if you have a lower vertical bat angle, negative 40, then what happens is you have to hit that ball deeper in the zone. Now, what's bad about that? Well, your bat speed, we talked about it. Your bat speed isn't as great there. So if you're an 80-pound kid and you're trying to let the ball get behind your front knee and your vertical bat angle is really steep, then you're just going to hit lazy fly balls to right field. If you're 280 pounds, those balls might go 350, 375 feet. Okay. So what I try to do is I can always teach somebody to dump their barrel. Like, that's not a difficult thing to me. That's why you hear so many big leaguers talk about their top hand. I do so many top hand drills. I got to keep my top hand strong. Okay. Because that controls the amount of vertical bat angle that you have. So a vertical bat angle, getting to our topic of bat quickness, if you have a very low vertical bat angle, negative 40 degrees, it means you have to hit the ball really deep in the zone, because that's where you get on plane. You will have great bat quickness, but I'm probably not going to sign you as a hitter.
Okay. And by the way, one big leaguer who talks a lot about his top hand is a guy who we're going to be breaking down next week. I'll unveil that at the end of our show today. Coming up, we're going to talk about how data and blast motion technology all correlates as well with bat speed and bat quickness. But first, Jake, I want to take a break and talk a little bit about the Lab BCS and how it's starting to open back up. Good news, things are across the country starting to settle down a little bit in some areas, and the Lab BCS is in College Station, Texas, hopefully opening back up very soon. And I was looking again on the website the other day. There's some pretty good prices and plans out there to make any hitter, baseball or softball, get to their highest level.
Yeah, we're pumped. Like, we're getting going. We pulled our members who wants to start back up, and 96.4% of them said, let's go. So the lab is so the BCS stands for Bryan College Station. That's just the area where it is. So we're going to get going on Monday, the 11th here in a few days. We're also putting together some out-of-state programs, which I normally do, but now we can really get crazy. We're talking about, doing a spring training kind of event for college players that are out there that want to come in, and, we'll do throwing and defense in the morning. We have a full turf field there. Then we go in, we take our BP. We have, obviously we'll keep our social distancing in there. We got 8,000 square feet, so everyone will have their own cage essentially. We'll get some BP work in. We'll get some hit tracks work. We'll work on training. And then the cool part is live at bats in the early afternoon. So we got college players from all over. Fortunately in College Station, we got A&M guys, we got Baylor guys, we got UT guys, we got Sam Houston State guys, we got Rice guys. There's so many players within an hour and a half. We're going to get after it pretty good. So look for those details. You can follow us, the Lab BCS, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We'll be posting all those details for the college kind of spring training stuff that we're going to kind of launch in June.
And if you're in the area or you want a lesson, be sure to check out the price points. Get a quote, log on to thelabbcs.com. Again, that is thelabbcs.com. All right, let's keep the show rolling here, Jake, and let's talk a little bit now about how the new age type data with blast motion technology, which a lot of teams are now using, as you know, in player development, and even hit tracks. And I'm not sure, I did some research on K-Vest. I've done it in the past. I'm trying to get more well-versed in that. I'm not sure if K-Vest, though, measures bat speed, bat quickness, as well as, say, blast motion technology does. But how much has blast motion technology, and something that you use actually at the Lab BCS and Epstein hitting, how has that helped your hitters evolve and show you their bat speed, bat quickness, and where it can improve?
So we do, talking about K-Vest. So we have a K-Vest. We have something called My Swing, which is very similar to K-Vest, only instead of 4 sensors measuring the kinetic change, we have 16 sensors. So we get every piece of the body, every bone in the body, essentially, moving in 3D space, and it gives us speed and angles and all that kind of stuff. So if we stack all this information, right, we have some kind of motion capture software being sensor based. Okay, so we'll say K-Vest because that's kind of an industry standard. Most major league teams have those. And then you have the blast motion, which goes on the bat, and then you have a hit tracks that goes on the ball. So your motion capture software measures what the body is doing. The blast measures what the bat is doing. And then the hit track says what the ball is doing, or the Rapsodo will tell you what the ball is doing. So if you can create an environment where all 3 of those things can be used at once for assessment, it makes the instructor better, obviously, once they learn how to use it. And then we can figure out and maximize the body. So how it works with bat quickness is, how much torque are we creating? We talked about that last week. That's what our 3-dimensional, sensor stuff tells us. Are there lags in our torque? Are we not creating enough? Okay, let's try to create a little bit more. So all of a sudden we adjust something mechanically with our body, and then the blast tells us, wow, you just shaved 1/100th of a second off of your bat quickness. Awesome. Okay, what did that do to the ball flight? Okay, the ball came off the bat, a mile an hour harder. All right, this is really good stuff. Or, hey, let's try to make this mechanical change, and we make this mechanical change. It doesn't change the anything the bat does, really, maybe quickness, but the ball speed averages are exactly the same. Well, we're not going to take six months and make this giant mechanical change if it's not going to affect the player in a positive way. And I think people overcoach the heck out of the swing. I think that's the difference between new age coaches, if you will, and the old school guys. Is new school guys think they gotta fix the world. Hey, I was that way too. My goodness, my dad was like, hey, you got to chill out, man. I know you're into the video. This was 15, 16 years ago, but you can't give the player too much information. Okay, you need to find a way to kind of stack that. So, when you talk about old school guys that are like, hey, man, change your grip. What? Change your grip. And most new school guys would be like, oh, that's just stupid. But maybe changing the grip keeps that player from dumping the barrel and then flipping his top hand over. So you have to be able to kind of look at everything and make sure that it makes sense for that player. If I have a player that's, 14 years old, right? He's trying to make a high school team. And there's something in his swing that is going to take me 6 months to fix, and he's got to be cognitive about that, and he's got tryouts in a month. There's no way I'm going to touch that. I got to get that kid to make that team, and then maybe over the winter we have time to get crazy with that. So, you have to, as a quality instructor, you really have to know the situation and the environment that each player is working in, and what kind of ability they have, and what their future holds, because you can totally give players way too much information that they just can't handle. And I think data, the amount of data that we have in there, accessible, can easily do that, and you have to have the right instructor to kind of translate that.
Thanks for saying that, because I think that's also the biggest difference in old school and new school type hitting coaches. And I think also, too, it has to do with a lack of wisdom. You have that wisdom. Somebody told me from an organization, a player on the player development side, about a year and a half ago, there's difference between, I think this applies to life, too, there's difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that tomatoes go into a fruit salad. Wisdom is knowing why it goes into that fruit salad. I think that's the analogy he used.
I'm not putting tomatoes, Jim, in my fruit salad, though.
No.
I mean, I know a tomato is considered a fruit because of the seeds. Maybe we should talk about that for a while. The differences between fruits and vegetables. Is a bell pepper a fruit because it has seeds?
No, it's a vegetable.
I don't know. I think it's a fruit.
Well, okay. Is an alligator considered an animal because it's a reptile?
So getting back
to that.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And wisdom, and you're right. It's having, it's having experience behind your knowledge, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
When you're looking at the blast motion technology and you're working with different level kids in terms of ages, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, so we'll put them into categories: 10 to 12, 13 to 16, 13 to 15, 15 to, this is 15 freshmen.
18, yeah.
Yeah, 15 to 18 freshmen to varsity, to senior year of baseball in high school. What are you looking for in the blast motion technology in regards to bat quickness and more so bat speed, but also obviously the bat quickness? I'm not sure blast motion technology does measure bat quickness. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
it does.
It does. What numbers are you looking for at different age groups to where you can say, okay, that young man or girl is up to par. This kid, though, is not. This is what we have to fix.
So there's so much that goes into that question. Bat quickness, when players are older. So on the blast sensor, it's time to contact. It's called time to contact. It's, anywhere from, with high school players, 0.15 seconds would be really good. Again, I usually measure this at the front toe. So at the front toe is where most of great contact is going to be made. Okay, we're going to do damage at our front toe. Ted Williams said out in front of your front foot. That's where you're going to do damage. What does that mean? It's usually to the pull side. Doesn't mean we can't hit the ball to the opposite field. Okay, but it means that's where most of our really good contact is going to be, at our front toes. So at our front toes, 0.15, 0.16 for older players. Sometimes younger players can get there too because they're strong and they're short. So think about their distance from launch to contact is actually a shorter actual distance because they're 5 foot versus somebody that's 6'3". Okay, so there is distance involved in that. Part of that is the KVS 2 or any of the 3D motions. They measure all these things. A lot of young players have great scores, but it's because their hips are only, like 24 inches. So that sensor doesn't have to travel as far, and it travels as fast. So, quite honestly, for young players, if I can keep, the little guys, the under 10-year-olds, under 0.20 for bat quickness, that's good. And then as we get older, 0.18 is good. And then moving up, 0.15 is good. In terms of bat speed, that unfortunately is more of an arbitrary number until you get to high school with a drop 3. Okay. So when you get a drop 3, then it's consistent, because some guys they're swinging drop 10s, some guys are swinging drop 8s, some guys are swinging drop 5s in those different age groups. And it doesn't really matter until you get to a drop 3. So what I look for is, what's your assessment? What are you swinging right now when you walk in the door? Okay, this is your bat speed. It's 50 miles an hour. Let's break everything down. Let's see what your bat is doing. Let's see what your body is doing. Let's see what the hit track says your ball is doing. Okay, let's chart all that. And then we go in and say, this is your biggest area for improvement. Okay, we got to get rid of this move with your top hand or your back elbow or your front arm or your back knee or whatever it is. And then we create that plan for that player, and then we see, do those numbers get better? Okay, so that's really important. The other thing that plays a huge point, especially players that are like 12 to 14, is puberty. So you could have a 13-year-old you can have a 12-year-old that's a man-child. And let me tell you, I've been in Texas for about 4 or 5 months now. There's some big boys down here. Like, I don't know what it is, but maybe they just, they're not eating vegetables as much. It's more beef, right? We don't have as many vegetarians and vegans. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but make sure you get your protein in you. But you can have a kid that's 30 pounds bigger than another kid. His bat speed's going to be way better. So, and same thing in high school. You can have a freshman that's 110 pounds and a freshman that's 160 pounds. Well, he's going to create more bat speed. So it's kind of like golf. You're playing against yourself. You're competing against yourself. Can you make yourself better? Here's where I am week 1. Where am I going to be week 5? We better be better. If you're not better, then we're going to go find another coach.
Sometimes coaches out there will chart, if you're a pitcher, where you need to be with your fastball velocity. Do you do that or something similar with a player's bat quickness?
No, not until they get older.
Okay.
Yeah. We do with bat quickness, but I will say we're not seeing huge. The baseball pyramid, right, gets smaller at the top. So, at 8 years old, everybody's playing, and you're going to have kids. Like, when I see a really bad swing, there's bad swings, right? They've never played before. They have no idea what they're doing, right? Come on in. Okay, my goodness. Well, their back quickness is going to be awful because their first move is hands, and the hands go back and down and around. Yeah, and they're going to cast, and so it's like, whoa, okay, well, your bat quickness was 0.24. That is awful. Okay, do this. So that's where we put the bat, in a certain spot on the shoulder, which you did when you were in college, right? Just to feel that move. And all of a sudden they go from 0.24 to 0.20 because they're more efficient. So it's such a valuable number. But once you get players that are pretty mature, you're not talking about much of a difference. 1 or 2 100ths of a second. Which is a huge difference, but I don't see a big difference between players. It's not like I'm going to see a college player with a 0.19 bat quickness. They're not playing anymore. For whatever reason, their mechanics or their athletic ability, it didn't happen. So once you get to the higher levels, but that bat quickness is pretty stable between most players.
I got to ask because this is like the main event question, and the title of the episode, bat speed and bat quickness. Okay. Which one is more important? Let's finally put that to rest.
Why you got to give me such a hard question?
Question.
I don't know. That's a chicken or the egg. So my old man used to say, if you got bat quickness, you'll have bat speed.
Okay.
But I think if you have bat speed, you probably have some bat quickness, because if you get long to try to create more bat speed, you're going to get slow. Okay. And if you get long trying to create more bat speed, then you won't have more bat speed because your sequencing is off with your body. So what is more important? I guess if I had somebody with really good bat quickness, but they didn't create any bat speed, the ball's probably not going to go anywhere. But if I have somebody that's really athletic and strong and can create bat speed, but they're 0.2 of a second behind the average in bat quickness, that dude's super athletic. And if I could get that player to be shorter to the ball, look out world. So I would have to take bat speed. I wish I could see Mike Piazza, his data numbers, because Mike Piazza is the guy that had so much bat speed, but it looked like the longest swing ever, the way he would, the way his arms worked. And I would love to see what his, blast numbers were back in the day, if we could do that.
Notice how you said that question was hard, but you answered it so seamlessly.
But did I give you an answer? Yeah, I did. I gave you an answer. Yeah, good question, though. Really good question.
Maybe it's maybe I'm off. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's more arbitrary? Maybe it's more of what the coach is thinking, and something that some people say bat quickness, others will say what you said, slight bat speed, slightly more.
Yeah, I think more people would say bat speed. I really do. I think people are so consumed with bat speed. You swing the bat really, 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 really hard, then the ball should go really, really, really far. But then you go back to bat quickness tells me if their mechanics are good. So you can have I've seen players with really great bat speed look so good off a tee that probably don't have bat quickness, but they've cheated that system so much that it makes it look good. But you put that player in an environment where they have to adjust to a moving object, and it doesn't play out. So, it depends on the environment. Like if I'm recruiting somebody and I see crazy bat speed off of a tee, I don't really care. That's great. That tells me if they're strong.
What about front?
Right. I mean, I can cheat, and quite honestly, like I can teach my players to cheat an exit velocity test any day of the week. Like it's not a difficult thing to do. Okay. Like what is the hardest hit ball in Major League Baseball every year? You know what it isn't? A line drive. It's always like a one-hop ground ball at a shortstop or a second baseman. It's totally squared up. You're hitting it 0 degrees off the bat. You're hitting the exact middle of the ball, and you're hitting the barrel. Okay? So what does that do? So when I see somebody doing let's get an exit velocity in your test, oh my goodness, you just hit that 95 miles an hour. One hopper to the shortstop. That doesn't tell me anything. What is your exit velocity on a 15-degree launch angle? Okay, a ball over a shortstop's head. It's not going to be as much because you don't hit the entire ball as much. You're going to have a little bit of, you're going to hit just below the middle of the ball. So I don't know. That's my whole bat speed thing is I think it's really important for strength. It tells me if somebody is athletic. It tells me if they were strong, but it doesn't necessarily tell me if they're going to be a very good hitter or not.
Everything you just said, I think it goes to prove that while these numbers, exit velocity, launch angle, I won't throw attack in there because that's pretty much getting on plane with the pitch. Mm-hmm. But two numbers in particular, it shows you where the value is, but it also shows you that we still have a long way to go in putting these things into context. Because to me, if a guy has a high exit velocity, if I'm scouting a player, and he hits a one-hopper, a low-line drive right to the shortstop, that should tell you a little bit and sway you towards the positive of that player.
Yeah, they will. Like, whoa, that ball was 102 miles an hour. That's great.
You mentioned Bryce Harper. Yeah. He smokes balls that might be a one-hopper to a guy in shallow right.
That's right. Poor guy.
So,
anyway. Yeah. No, we had, I think I mentioned old Zim. He was at Mizzou. He'll be back, senior years. He's going to be a 12th-year senior next year. I hope you're listening to this, Pete. But anyway, he hit a ball at Vanderbilt last year. It was the hardest ball I've ever seen hit. And the cool part is we get TrackMan. So his TrackMan numbers are insane. He's a strong guy with a short swing, right? And he hit a ball that went over their monster there in left field. And I believe it was like 108 or 100. Was it 108 miles an hour, 109 miles an hour? Home run. Like if you go to StatCast, home runs usually aren't that high. Or maybe it was 112. I don't know. But it's very hard to hit a ball high and hit a ball really hard. Usually the balls that are hit hard are much lower. So when you see a guy that can elevate a ball 20 degrees and hit it that hard, now all of a sudden that's something a little bit more special.
So next time you're watching baseball, anybody who's listening, come back and you hear the announcer say, "Oh, that was hit with exit velocity of 185 miles per hour." Be sure to add context. That's why I love when Joe Buck calls a game, because he doesn't use those metrics as much. He just calls the game pristine and pure. All right, next
nice
week.
Job. We just lost half of our listening base by you putting Joe Buck out there. My goodness. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry. Yeah. The number's going to drop this week. I'm going to lose followers. I'm the only guy who hosts 2 podcasts and lose followers on Twitter.
That's right, because you threw Joe Buck out there. At least you didn't put Aikman with him. You just kept Buck. That's okay.
Not an Aikman.
I'm a Romo fan. I don't know. We may have lost people there too, but I like listening to Romo do games.
Aikman was for those who don't know, he was my favorite player growing up.
Was he?
Player.
Wow. And you grew up in Philly? Come on.
Well, my dad was a Giants fan as well, so he didn't like that very much. My friends at school didn't like that I loved Aikman as well. They were all Eagles fans.
Absolutely.
I loved Troy Aikman. I loved his play, his attitude. Loved it all. He was, some would say overrated. I say underrated. Okay, next week we are...
A lot of rings.
A lot of rings. And at the end of the day, isn't that all? Okay. With the Nationals, they get blamed for not playing Bryce Harper by some pundits, but
right.
Well, they've got the ring.
That's right. They got the ring.
So next week, Jake and I will dive into our first installment of our mechanical breakdown series. And we're going to be breaking down the mechanics of Major League and minor league hitters throughout the country during this data series, this mechanical series. There's going to be plenty of installations of it, and it's our first one next week. And Jake, next week we'll be doing, drum roll, your guy, you love him, I like him too, Christian Yelich. That'll be our breakdown. Christian Yelich next week.
That'll be good. Like, I can't wait to do these because we get to see different ends of the spectrum, and even today, 2020, when baseball starts up again, there's not one package. One size doesn't fit all. That's why this game is so beautiful, is you can have different sizes, you can have different speeds, and you can have different goals from different players. And I think Yelich is, one of the... He doesn't swing down, don't think that, but he's one of the flatter swingers. If we were to take an average attack angle, I'm not talking about his exit velocity or his launch angle, but if you look at his attack angle, how much he swings up, versus other guys in the league, he's one of the guys that's a little bit more level. He's still 5 to 12 degrees up, but he's not 10 to 20 degrees up. And so it'll be cool to kind of see the difference on why that happens and what adjustments he has to make timing-wise to fit what his swing plane is. And that'll be really cool to do.
Yeah, it'll sort of be like a watch-along, but if you're listening in your car, you can't watch along, or whatever the case may be, we're going to give you directions later on to how you can log on to YouTube, wherever we find the video, and follow along with what Jake and I are discussing with his hitting mechanics. That's next week. Don't forget to subscribe, like the podcast. We're on a ton of platforms now. Jake, we're on, I think, 10 different platforms now. If you count our YouTube page that is still building, be sure to subscribe to that, youtube.com, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. But also we are on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundClouds. Okay, so that's 11. SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, the TuneIn Radio app. Show's building, and we really appreciate everybody listening and being along with us for this journey, this hitting journey that we do once a week.
It's awesome. It's been so fun, and the feedback I'm getting from people, they're totally digging it. So let's keep it. We're going to keep it rolling. I'm looking at our topics list that's built out for months and months. So we'll be here every Monday for you.
Yep. Our quest to get to 1,000 episodes.
That's the quest. Man, imagine what I'm going to look like in 1,000 episodes.
1,000 episodes with me as a co-host.
That's good.
Make you rip your hair out. That's next week. We'll talk about that. Christian Yelich Mechanical Breakdown. Thank you for subscribing and liking the podcast. New episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Jake, good work today, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Look forward to it, Jim.